My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 68 years old now. And if you ask me what my biggest regret is, it wouldn't be about money. It wouldn't be about my career. It wouldn't be about opportunities I missed. My biggest regret is much simpler than that. It's about my parents. When I was young, I never imagined I would lose them. I know that sounds foolish. Everyone knows parents won't live forever. But knowing something and truly understanding it are two very different things. When you're a child, your parents feel permanent, like mountains, like the sky. They're simply there, every day, every year, every season of your life. My mother was the heart of our home. She woke up before everyone else, made breakfast, packed lunches, remembered birthdays, remembered everyone's favorite meal. She somehow managed to keep our family together without ever asking for credit. My father was quieter, a hard-working man, the kind of man who rarely spoke about his feelings. But he taught me things without saying much. How to shake someone's hand, how to keep your word, how to show up when people need you, how to keep going even when life gets difficult. Back then, I didn't think much about any of it. I was a kid. Kids rarely understand what they're being given while they're receiving it. I thought life would always be that way. Mom in the kitchen, dad coming home from work, family dinners, laughter, arguments over nothing, ordinary days, the kind of days you barely notice while they're happening. Looking back now, those ordinary days were the most valuable days of my life. But I didn't know that. At 18, I left home for college. I was excited, ready to start my own life, ready for freedom, ready for the future. My mother cried when she hugged me goodbye. My father tried not to. I still remember seeing them standing in the driveway as I pulled away. My mother waving, my father with his hands in his pockets. I thought I'd be back all the time. I thought there would be endless weekends, endless holidays, endless conversations. But life has a way of speeding up when you're not paying attention. College became work. Work became promotions. Promotions became responsibilities. Then came marriage, children, a mortgage, bills, deadlines. The years started moving faster, and little by little, without realizing it, I began giving my parents whatever time I had left over. Not because I didn't love them. I loved them very much. That's what makes this regret so painful. I wasn't neglecting strangers. I was neglecting the people who loved me first, the people who sacrificed for me long before anyone else ever did. My mother would call. Sometimes I'd answer. Sometimes I wouldn't. And when I didn't, I'd tell myself the same thing. I'll call her later. Later. It's such an innocent word, and such a dangerous one, because later always feels guaranteed. When you're young, you believe there will always be another day, another weekend, another Christmas, another phone call, another visit. You don't realize that one day you'll run out of laters. My parents never complained. Not once. That's one of the reasons I missed the signs. They never demanded my attention, never made me feel guilty. They were just happy whenever I showed up, even if it had been too long, even if I stayed for only a short while. My mother would make coffee, my father would ask about work, and then I'd leave again. Back to my busy life. Back to the things I thought mattered most. At the time, I believed I was doing the right thing. I was working hard, providing for my family, building a future. I thought that was what responsible adults did, and maybe it was. But there was a balance I never learned. A balance between building a life and actually living it. The older I got, the less often I called. Not intentionally. At least that's what I told myself. Life was busy. There was always something urgent, a meeting, a project, a bill, a school event for my children. Something needed fixing. Something needed attention. And somehow, the people who had given me their entire lives kept getting pushed to tomorrow. At first I called my parents every few days, then once a week, then every other week. And before I realized it, a month could pass in what felt like a few days. My mother never mentioned it. She never said, "Why don't you call more often?" She never complained. Instead, whenever I finally called, she'd answer with the same excitement. "Robert," as if hearing my voice had made her entire day, and every time, I'd feel a small ache of guilt, but not enough to change. Not yet. One afternoon, I stopped by unexpectedly. I had a meeting nearby, just 30 minutes to spare. I remember pulling into their driveway, the same driveway I'd seen thousands of times, my father's truck, my mother's flower pots. Nothing looked different, but something felt different. When I walked inside, I noticed they had both aged. Not dramatically, not overnight. Just enough for me to realize time had been moving while I wasn't paying attention. My father's hair was almost completely gray. My mother's hands looked older, thinner, more fragile. And suddenly I had a strange feeling, a feeling I didn't like. For the first time in my life, I saw my parents as elderly people. Not mom and dad, not the strong adults from my childhood, just two aging people, getting older, year by year. And it unsettled me, because some part of me still expected them to stay the same forever. That afternoon, my mother made coffee. My father asked about work. The same conversation we'd had 100 times before. But now I wish I had asked different questions. I wish I had asked about their dreams, their fears, their happiest memories. I wish I had asked my father what he was most proud of. I wish I had asked my mother what her childhood was like. I wish I had listened more. Instead, I talked mostly about myself. Then I looked at my watch, said I had to go, and left. Just another ordinary visit. At least that's what I thought. Years passed. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I was sitting in a conference room, the kind with fluorescent lights and people discussing things nobody remembers a week later. My phone buzzed. I looked down. The screen said, "Mom." I remember staring at her name, just for a second. Then I silenced the phone. I told myself I'd call after the meeting. The meeting lasted longer than expected. Then another problem came up. Then another. By the time I got home, I was tired. I sat down, turned on the television, and forgot. The next day I remembered, but I was already running late. So I told myself, I'll call tonight. Tonight became tomorrow. Tomorrow became the weekend. And the weekend never came. A few days later, my sister called. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. She was crying, and suddenly my entire body felt cold. Mom had been taken to the hospital. I don't remember much after that. Just driving, praying, begging for things I couldn't control. And one thought kept repeating itself over and over again. Why didn't I answer the phone? Why didn't I call her back? Why? When I arrived at the hospital, everything felt unreal. The parking lot, the elevators, the long hallways, the smell, the silence. It was as if the entire world had suddenly slowed down. My sister was sitting outside my mother's room. The moment I saw her face, I knew. Something inside me already knew. She stood up and hugged me. Neither of us said much. There weren't any words that could make sense of what was happening. I walked into the room, and there she was, my mother, the woman who had spent her entire life taking care of everyone else, the woman who always knew exactly what to say, the woman who could make any house feel like home. She looked so small, so fragile, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid to look at her, because looking meant accepting reality. I pulled a chair beside her bed, took her hand, and suddenly I wasn't 60 years old. I was 6. I was 12. I was 18. I was every version of myself she'd ever loved. Memories came flooding back. Her walking me to school, helping me with homework, sitting beside my bed when I was sick, waiting up when I came home late, cheering for me when nobody else did, believing in me before I believed in myself. And all I could think was this: how did I ever become too busy for this woman? How? The doctors came and went. Machines beeped quietly. Hours passed. Then sometime later, my mother opened her eyes. She looked tired, But she smiled when she saw me. That smile nearly broke me, because even then, she looked happy that I was there. Not angry, not hurt, not disappointed, just happy. I leaned closer, tears already in my eyes, and I said the words I should have said far more often. I love you, Mom. She squeezed my hand, very gently. Then she whispered, I know. 3 simple words. I know. And somehow they hurt and healed me at the same time, because she had always known. Parents usually do. They know even when we don't say it enough. But knowing isn't the same as hearing it, and hearing it isn't the same as feeling it regularly. That night I stayed beside her. For once. There was nowhere else I needed to be. No meeting, no deadline, no responsibility more important than that moment. And I realized something painful. The things that had felt so important all those years weren't sitting in that hospital room with me. The emails weren't there. The meetings weren't there. The promotions weren't there. The overtime wasn't there. Only people mattered. Only love mattered. Only time mattered. Everything else suddenly looked very small. A few days later, my mother passed away, and a part of me went with her. The funeral came and went. People brought food. People shared stories. People said all the things people always say. But grief doesn't really happen at funerals. Grief happens afterward, when life gets quiet, when you reach for the phone, when you hear good news, when something reminds you of them, when you realize there is nobody left to call. Months later, I found myself listening to old voicemails, just to hear her voice. One message, then another, then another. And I would sit there wondering what I wouldn't give for one more ordinary conversation. Not a special conversation, not a perfect conversation, just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Just hearing her say, "Hi, sweetheart," one more time, because ordinary moments become priceless the moment they're gone. My father lived several years after my mother, and after losing her, something changed in me. I started calling him more, visiting more, listening more. I finally understood what I should have understood decades earlier. Time with people you love is not something you save for later. It is the point. It was always the point. After my mother passed away, I began seeing time differently. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Loss has a way of teaching lessons that comfort never can. My father was alone now. The house felt quieter, smaller somehow. Every time I visited, I noticed little things. An empty chair at the kitchen table, a coffee cup that only one person used, silence where my mother's voice used to be. And for the first time in years, I stopped rushing. When my father wanted to tell a story, I listened, even if I'd heard it before. When he wanted to take a drive, I went. When he wanted company, I stayed longer. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch without saying much at all. Just 2 men watching the day pass. And those became some of the most valuable hours of my life. One afternoon he looked at me and said, "You've been coming around a lot more lately." I smiled. Then I said, "I should have done it years ago." He nodded slowly. And after a long pause, he said something I'll never forget. "Don't be too hard on yourself, son. Most people don't understand what's important until time teaches them." At the time, I didn't answer. I just sat there, thinking, because he was right. Most of us think we have time, unlimited time, time to visit, time to call, time to apologize, time to say thank you, time to say I love you. And then one day, we discover time was never making those promises. A few years later, I lost my father too. And when he was gone, I became the oldest generation in my family. That realization hit me harder than I expected. There was nobody left to call Mom. Nobody left to call Dad. Nobody left who remembered me as a little boy. Nobody left who had been there from the beginning. And suddenly, I understood something that had been right in front of me my entire life. Parents spend years preparing us for a world without them. But nothing prepares us for a world without our parents. Nothing. Today I'm 68 years old, and if I could go back and change one thing, it wouldn't be a career decision. It wouldn't be an investment. It wouldn't be a mistake at work. I would give my parents more of my time, more conversations, more visits, more patience, more attention. I would sit at the kitchen table longer. I would ask more questions. I would listen to more stories. I would make more memories. Because now I understand something I didn't understand when I was younger. Love is measured in time, not intentions, not someday, not later. Time. The people you love don't need your perfect schedule. They don't need your success. They don't need another excuse. They need you, your presence, your attention, your voice, your time. If your parents are still alive, call them. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when work calms down, not when life becomes easier. Today. Even if the conversation lasts only 5 minutes, call them. Ask them about their day. Ask them about their childhood. Ask them about the stories you've never heard. One day you'll wish you could. And trust me, that day comes faster than you think. Because the biggest lesson I've learned in 68 years is this: the people we love most are not going to be here forever, and neither are we. So don't wait, don't assume, don't postpone. Make the call, take the visit, stay a little longer, because one ordinary conversation today may become the memory you treasure for the rest of your life.